Okay, so once again, good evening, everyone. The weather here in Hyderabad is really beautiful. I hope so. In Bhopal also it is the same. Once again, BiGTalks and Energy Swaraj Foundation welcomes you all to the third day of the fifth 5-day webinar on need and directions towards energy independence. So before we begin, we would like to thank Computer Society of India, Hyderabad chapter, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, Hyderabad chapter, Broadcasting Engineering Energy Society, Institute of Electronics and Telecommunications Engineers, Hyderabad, and Indian Society for Technical Educations, Maturi Venkata Subba Rao Engineering College, chapter for collaborating to organize this event. As we all know, there are some rules to be followed while we are on the webinar. Let me once again speak out those rules. Kindly keep yourself on mute, audio as well as video. We have a dedicated question and answer sessions at the end. Hence, request you to please share your questions in the link in the chat box. On social media, we are running campaign with BiGTalks India, BiGTalks and Energy Swaraj on Twitter and Koo. So please tweet and Koo your comments. We will share a link of feedback on the session, your views. Please share your thoughts over the chat box and the link. Let me begin with welcoming speaker of the day, Sri Professor Dr. Chetan Singh Solanki, a professor from IIT Bombay and founder of Energy Swaraj Foundation. He is author of many books and international articles, brand ambassador of solar energy for the state of Madhya Pradesh. He is currently living this lifestyle also. He has decided to live in a bus that is running on solar energy, not for 1 day, 2 day, but for 10 years. He is an awardee of IEEE Global Grand Prize of US $10,000, 100,000. Professor Solanki has also been referred to as Solar Man of India by several newspapers, including Times of India, The Hindu, and India Today. Some people also call him Solar Gandhi. Last 2 days, the session were an eye-opener. Human activities like burning of fossil fuels have increased the amount of CO2 in atmosphere, mostly after the Industrial Revolution. Climate change has consequences on our oceans, our weather, our food sources, and our health. Ice sheets of Arctic and Antarctic are melting fast. Sea levels rising that leads to drowning of several cities across the globe, mostly the border cities. Storms, floods, snowfall on one side, and frequent droughts on the other side have become very big challenge for human survival. Forests are being cut, agriculture is suffering, animals have to move from one place to another as their habitats are shrinking, as water supply is diminishing. As Dr. Chetan spoke yesterday, we have little time to stop this change. Let us know more about the effects of climate change or the impact of climate change on national development or the nation development. Sir, the platform is open for you.
Thank you very much once again, and it is pleasure to be here and talking to all of you. We are in the series of lectures where I'm going to why from the current energy sources energy independence. To allow me to share my screen. Okay. So in this series, I'm going to talk to you today regarding the third topic. And so far, what we have been discussing is a part of the series, as I mentioned earlier, need and direct for energy independence, as we are celebrating our Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav 75 years. In this direction, we already had two talks, and first was the energy is everything. And I hope you remember described that every single activity that we do in our life has a touch of energy. Everywhere there is a use of energy, and knowingly and unknowingly we have been using a lot of energy. Unfortunately, these energy sources are coming from coal, petrol, diesel, LPG, CNG, 85% of it, which is one of the side effect is emission of carbon dioxide, which is resulting in global warming, which eventually results in climate change. And yesterday we have seen that climate has changed. It is not that it is going to change. This has already happened, and several events all over the world in the last 2 months itself has shown that how disastrous it can be. In continuation in this series, today I'm going to talk to you about impacts climate change on the nation's development and what happens to country. What happens to a country, when what is the impact of the climate change on the nation's development? And tomorrow the topic decided was how do we transit from fossil energy for the national security and for change, um, and eventually last day direction towards energy independence. Uh, uh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine these two talks, 18th and 19th, on one talk that is tomorrow only. So tomorrow I will talk about how do we transit from fossil fuels to alternative energy generation, and how do we move towards energy independence. So for some reason I need to series to 5 to 4. So tomorrow will be our last day. All right, so today we are going to discuss about what are the impacts of the climate change on nations' development. And eventually, the climate change is there because each one of us have been using energy. Our own lives are getting affected. But if you look at the broader picture, it is the entire country, entire planet that is getting affected. And therefore, whatever is our understanding of development, the modern humans understanding of development, the social development, economic development, environmental development, whatever is our understanding, let us see how much it is getting affected and what really happens when climate changes. So from the very basic definition, we know that national development is the ability of a country to improve the social, environmental, and economic welfare of the people. And that is what we refer to the national development. Social, economical, and environmental welfare of the people, if it is. And what happens if you are developing in these three parameters, it will result in a better standard of living. And that is what every country is looking after. Now, the standard of living is that what we want eventually, and that is what ultimate goal of the national development. And I would show you that how the climate change would affect our standard of living. Corona last year, this year is one such an example that how it affects, forget about standard of living, even the normal living gets affected. And that is a good example on what can happen. So another dimension of the national development, in case if you are making a about social, economical, environmental parameters, happens overall, it is manifested, the national development is manifested in the form of growth and expansion of countries' industries, agriculture, education, social, religious, and cultural institutions. So if a country is growing, nationally developing, then its industries will grow, its agriculture will grow, education will grow, social and religious activities will grow. That is what we understand of social development so far. And this is also very well captured in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that is set by United Nations. So economic pillar or growth of a country will have no poverty, work conditions and economic growth, and setting of industry. Environmental pillars will include good clean drinking water and sanitation, affordable energy for everyone, life below water, which is the underwater life, and the air life is also well. It's environmental parameter. And social parameters is that people will get good education, it will have reduced inequities, sustainable cities will be there, there'll be peace, justice, etc. So this is in a nutshell what the national development is all about. These are all parameters. And one graph that I've been showing you all the time is that all these parameters of the national development are affected and related to energy. So the energy is the core of all these social, environmental, and economic parameters. And therefore, again, if we can take care of our energy demand and supply in a manner that it does not affect the environment without compromising with our growth, is going to be the best solution. And therefore, it is the energy or the flow of energy that affects the climate change. So in what way climate change affects the nation is that we need to understand, and again understand from the broader picture, so that each one of us can take appropriate action. So in my way, of course, energy is a driver of social and economic growth parameters that we have been seeing again and again, and I've shown today also. But what does the climate change do? It actually creates unusual conditions in which flow of energy gets disturbed, that affects the normal operations, and which affects the growth of a nation. So the flow of energy get disturbed, and I believe that all that happens due to the climate change, all the disasters that happens, all that unusual phenomena that happens, those unusual phenomena, whether it is flood, whether it is drought, whether it is some kind of cyclone, which is nothing but a disturbed or a flow of energy, not a regular flow of energy, not a natural flow of energy that we used to have. And energy can sometimes be very disastrous, for example, very high intensity cyclone, you can also consider as a very high intense flow of energy in that area. High amount of flood, high amount of rains, and then corresponding flood is also high amount of energy that flows. But these are the unnatural disturbed flow of energy. So I would see from this perspective that what does the climate change is doing? It is resulting in the disturbed energy flow. And the disturbed energy will flow, will disturb the normal operations. So if a country at the national, in normal times, a country will having its own economic activities, its own social activities, there will be industries that are running, people will be going to school, children are educating, getting learning, and then the shops are working. So everything is a normal flow. And when abnormal activities happens due to the climate change, this normal flow will get affected, right? And national development is a combination of all these activities that is taking place in a nation. And if those normal flow gets affected, the nation's development will definitely gets affected. And I'm going to show you how the climate change is affecting those normal flow of activity that takes place in and out, day in and day out, in any country, which is nothing ultimately is but a disturbed flow of energy. I think we can look at this aspect of climate change, and every time something happens, we can relate to this. So eventually, the great economic losses will also happen, and will affect the national development that I've been telling. So now let us look at the human impacts of the climate change. What are the impacts that will happen on the human life on this planet as a part of the climate change? So very simple, which we can easy to understand, that human impacts on climate change will be by the way, so the national development means basic parameter first, like water, clean food, proper clean air, and shelter. These are all very basic parameters, and then the growth of this parameter. So what happens because of the climate change, there'll be scarcity of fresh water resources. So very basic, as fundamental as water also gets affected. There'll be weather-related disasters that will take place, and food insecurity will increase, and migration and displacement will take place. So these are the human level impact. When such a thing happens, when there is a water scarcity, when there is a food scarcity, when there's a migration, what happens? Social tensions builds up. There'll be more competition for the scarce resources. There'll be more strain on the government capacity to deal with this tension, right? So as the human impacts become more intense, there is more tensions that gets built in the society. And when this happens, there'll be instability, there'll be institutional breakdown, there'll be social destabilization, there'll be weak performance, and as a result, what you can see is entire development of the country kind of gets blocked, gets affected, gets derailed, and in a way, this very basic, simple things will affect the country in a major way, uh, as much as even breaking down of the country can also happen. So that's why it is very, very important that the climate change is not one simple event or a small event which can pass by the time. It is going to stay here, and the effect of the climate change is going to be really long lasting. Can everybody mute themselves, please?
Hari Krishna Garu, can you please switch off your audio? Hari Krishna ji, Dr. Hari Krishna ji, Azad ji, Chetan Kothari ji, can you please switch off your audios? Chetan ji, the rights are with you. Can you please drop them?
While making a presentation, I can't do this. I'm trying to do it. Maybe I have to stop presentation and then do. I'm removing one person.
Sir, you can give me rights. I'll monitor from here. I'll manage the things.
Then I cannot present. Anyway, so now he's muted. All right, coming back. I don't know, every day you'll find one or two such element. All right. So, so what I'm saying is, so the climate change can affect and disturb the growth of the nation in a major way, even up to destabilization of a nation, even a breakdown of a nation. So this is the ultimate thing what can happen, and I'm going to show whether how it can happen. So there are many disasters that happens due to the climate change. For example, droughts, earthquakes, extreme temperature, floods, landslides, mass movements, storms, wildfire. These are the activities that possibly can happen. And what does it do? First of all, what happens? What is happening on this planet is that the disasters intensity and the frequency of the disasters has been have been increasing every year. But the last year particularly, we have to note it clearly, and I think 2021 is going to beat the last year, but we have the data till 2020. So till the last year, if you look at the disasters or the number of disasters from 2000 till 2019, there were about 368 disaster that has happened. But in 2020 alone, there were 389 disasters that has taken place. So one thing is very clear, and I think we do not even need this data, because our own experience now tells us that the frequency of the occurrence of the disasters are increasing. Also, there is another parameters that not only that the frequency of disasters occurrence is increasing, but the intensity of the disaster also increasing. You know, if the flood happens, it is terrible. It will, if the fire happens, it will become terrible. So both intensity and the frequency of the disasters will increase, which will affect the basic things, water, food, public movement in a major way. And these are all disturbances to the energy flow. And in my understanding, all these disturbances will result in the slowdown of the national development and will affect us in many ways. Where these disasters are happening and where does the population gets affected most? These are the vulnerability index. If you can see that this will happen mainly in the area where the population is not so rich and do not have a lot of resources to go through such a disaster. So basically in Africa and Asia, you can see from this index, and the population is going to get affected in a very, very significant way. However, that is not the, but that is a general index, but there are phenomena that I'm going to show here that even web countries, even America or even Europe will get affected very much. So the flood Katrina has really affected a great economic loss in America, and the heat waves in Europe are one of the worst case where the deaths have happened. So it's not only the Africa and Asia which will get affected, but Europe and America will also get affected, and other developed countries will also get affected from the events. So if you look at what has happened due to the climate change, there are 15,000 deaths that has happened. This is the number of only last year, 2020, and 98.4 million people got affected. Of course, there is a COVID that is going on, and because of the COVID, number of people affected are much more. This 98.4 million people, this number is only because of the climate change. This does not take care of the COVID affected people. So what I'm saying is, what you can see is that about 100 million people getting affected from the climate change event that is taking place. The economic loss is also very significant, and in the last year alone, 2020, the total loss of economy, and you can see now that in the earlier case, the number of people affected and deaths are in different region. Asia, for example, is particular, but if you look at the economic impact or the losses, you can see the South America and North America have the significant percentage. So therefore, the point that I want to make here is that it is not one continent, one country, but it is the entire planet that will get affected in one way or other, and all this will affect the overall well-being of humans, social, economic, and environmental well-being. So all the disaster that has happened, if you look at that, how it is becoming more intense and more frequent. So if you look at the occurrence of disaster, number of deaths, number of affected people, and economic loss from 2000 to 2019 and in 2020 alone. So look at the economic loss in 2020 alone, it is $171 billion as compared to previous 19 years, $151 billion. The disasters, as I showed earlier, the 2020, the last year has happened 389 numbers, while the previous 19 years is 368 numbers. So what you can see, every parameter is now increasing, and this increase is not going to be the linear, by the way. So that is what makes the whole thing even more worrisome. And let us look into the details. What are the things and how closely it is going to affect our own lives as the time comes. For example, as the climate changes, as the weather becomes erratic, there will be more droughts and more floods. And even if, or even if there is a flood, one of the first thing that gets affected in either case is the access to the safe drinking water. And as the time will go by, the drinking water supply will get affected, and it is estimated that about 74% people will get affected in one way or other, and by 2040, 1 in 4 children. So the water distress will increase significantly as we go further, and that definitely is part of our basic human well-being. What will happen to the food insecurity? Well, because of the climate change, the temperatures, sometimes there'll be heat waves, sometimes there'll be a heavy rainfall. So the bigger picture is a climate change, and under that there'll be a erratic weather pattern of the floods and droughts. Sea level rise is also taking place. As a result of that, there'll be more floods and droughts in a region. There's an increase in salinity of water due to the sea intrusion, and that will affect the food yield and supply, and that will affect the agriculture, livestock, and the entire food security itself will become a question mark. So can you imagine that the 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 climate change is not a simple one or two activity. It is eventually going to affect our basic living, which is the water and food and air and those kind of thing. And therefore, national development in business as usual term is just economic growth, but in the deeper sense, it will actually affect and create tensions within the countries, across the countries, also, and it can create a condition of destabilization. So therefore, the food supply can get affected from the climate change. Migration and displacement will happen in a major way. One of the example that is normally always comes up is the Bangladesh. The Bangladesh, quite a significant portion of Bangladesh is in a low lying area. It's very close to the sea level. And because the sea level is rising, there's a water that is intruding into the people's field, which are living in a low lying coastal areas. And people have to displace. And look at this number, 2 million people migrate every year in Bangladesh just because of the sea level rise, because of this one side effect of the climate change, sea level rise. Of course, the amount of loss that takes place due to agriculture, the deaths that takes place, people which get affected, everything is there. But 2 million people migrating each year. This is only a story of Bangladesh. There are many people who are living in the coastal areas in many parts of the world, and therefore the sea level rise, which is happening because of the climate change, will affect millions and millions of people. So it is going to affect the basic living, basic standard of living. Forget about the national development or the growth that definitely will get affected. Hurricane Katrina that we know, it was a really disastrous, and the economic loss due to the Hurricane Katrina was about $100 billion that has taken place. 1,800 people lost their lives, and lot of insurance claims that have happened. About 1.75 million people claimed the insurances. So basically, it affects the scale of the damage that is going to take place. Now, any such reason anywhere in the world will impact the overall growth of a country. Therefore, in the context of the modern century, when we talk about ever growing economies, ever growing consumption, ever growing production, let us pause and think that forget about the air growing economies and consumption and production, our own basic life amenities, basic water, basic food supply itself will get affected. Also, the recent report that is coming, that there is a very fast melting of the Himalayan glaciers. One of the youngest glaciers on this planet are the Himalayan glaciers, but there is a 7% rate at which this is melting. And if this happens, it is going to affect the water supply to about 4 billion people. China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Tibet, Nepal, Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, all these countries will get affected in one way or other for their basic water supply if the climate change will continue to happen at the rate. 4 billion people can get affected with this water supply. So this is another side effect that will happen as we can see with respect to the climate change. Now at the end, let us think about the solution. So the economic loss is very clear. I showed you earlier that last year alone there's $171 billion was the loss. And this loss, by the way, is a big number, definitely. But what we should realize that from 2000 to 2019, the loss is $151 billion. In 2020, it is $171 billion. And we know very well how 2021, I have showed you all the images and the data, how 2021 has been much more disastrous than 2020. And therefore, by the end of 2021, we will be calculating the economic loss and definitely it's going to be much more than 2020 numbers. What I'm trying to tell you that the loss to the economy, which is a measurable parameter, is not going to be linear. It is not going to be the same every year. The increase in the loss can be by several factors and several orders of magnitude as well. And therefore, one must be extremely careful in actually thinking the direction of the climate change, the correction of the climate change based on the economic parameters. Because you never know how much more loss will happen next year. So therefore, we need alternative approach for economic growth, and that approach is required immediately. So the next question is, suppose we decide that yes, there is a problem, we understand, and if the problem is very clear, we need to solve it. That is also very clear. What is the cost of mitigating climate change? How much it will take? So one of the report from IEA, International Energy Administration, actually brings the perspective. It says that the cost of going from fossil fuels, which is the main reason, one of the main reason for the climate change. So the cost of going from fossil fuel to low carbon sources will be almost like $44 trillion between now and 2050. $44 trillion. Of course, the losses that we are talking about is $171 billion only, and the cost is $44 trillion. Now the question. Now the question. Now the question.
Azad ji, can you please mute yourself?
Now the question is it really too much? Is this cost of economic correction, a cost of climate change correction of $44 trillion is too much? And whether countries can afford it, whether countries can able to sustain such an investment into the low carbon sources so that we can mitigate climate change. So it is, in Hindi में कहते हैं एक तरफ क्या बोलते हैं, एक तरफ पहाड़ एक दूसरी तरफ खाई, दोनों तरफ ही प्रॉब्लम है. If you do not correct it, then you are in trouble. But if you want to correct it, then you require a lot of resources, a lot of money, which many countries will not have it. So therefore, that is where the innovation should lie. That is where we need to really find a way. And therefore, I believe that yes, it is going to take cost, but this cost will be $44 trillion only when we think in terms of the business as usual model. When everything is measured in terms of the more production, more consumption, when economies are measured from that, economies are driven by that, we are going to, invest $44 trillion. But the moment you take a different approach, the moment the national development is not GDP development, the national development is not GDP growth, the national development is not about the availability of money, but the national development is about well-being of people. The moment you adopt a different approach and the ultimate purpose becomes the well-being, not the amount of money that we can accumulate in a country and amount of highways that we can build. When it is all about the well-being, your approach is going to be different. And when your approach is going to be different, you will not have to spend $44 trillion in the efforts. And I hope the whole world realize, and we have discussed earlier, that eventually what we are seeking in our life is not the material. What we are seeking is eventually the happiness. And that can be achieved in a different parameters. And again, I must quote Bhutan as an example, where the whole parameter or the context of the national development is different than just the wealth creation. So the moment we reshape what we are looking for, I think it is not going to be as expensive as it looks like to mitigate the climate change. So economic cost of mitigation climate change can be much lower, and the approach has to be different. That is what I mentioned. What should be that approach? What is that alternative approach? I'm going to discuss in the next talk, that is tomorrow. And as I said, the fourth day and fifth day topic will be combined. It will be one topic that I'm going to discuss tomorrow. And we are also going to conclude this series tomorrow. So with this note, I would like to stop here, and thank you for your attention today. And I hope, like we have been having a good discussion, let us have a good discussion about the national development and how the climate change is affecting it. So thank you very much once again. And let me stop my presentation, and let us discuss it now.
Yeah, thank you, Chetanji. Every day while we talk or listen to you, it looks like, oh man, what are we going to do now? What are we going to know? Hopefully, from this thought process only we will come out with some solution. And as you said, alternative solutions are required, which we'll discuss tomorrow. So, for the question answer session, I wanted to have a first question on this. What trends do you see as far as economy is concerned, uh, or economy losses, trends in economy losses coming in for the years to follow?
Well, I think I have said very clearly that the economic losses due to the climate change, first of all, is not going to be linear. So uh, let us not predict what will happen next year. But one thing is very clear, that the intensity of the climate change conditions, disasters, and the frequency of the climate change disasters are going to increase both. And therefore the loss, I would believe, typically the events will be uh, uh, not in a linear manner, so it will increase exponentially. And very soon it will become much more than the cost of the correction. And therefore the wisdom lies in the fact that rather than the looking at the cost of correction, let us just do it, because right now the economics are driven by how much I get. My electricity cost is this much, but my solar cost is this much. If I go by that logic, we will not be able to correct the climate change in time, and eventually we are going to pay much more than the investment that is required today. But the important thing and the important learning is, let us make that investment today. Let us correct it today. Let us, all of us, become independent for mitigating the climate change. And how do we become independent? By adopting to solar energy as early as possible.
Right. So there is a question from Brinda Manjeet. What she is asking is, how can a common man be part of this fight, or how can the common man put himself in a place where he can also give his inputs and fight this problem?
Well, I think first of all, we are going to discuss what a common man can do. We are going to discuss tomorrow. But even today, the brief answer is that for a simple logic, that the climate change is caused by the use of energy in the form of coal, petrol, diesel, LPG, CNG. All of us have been using these energy sources in one way or other, when we use directly in the form of electricity, when we use in the form of products, when we use in the form of transportation, when we use in the form of cooking, all of us have been using these energy sources, and therefore all of us are responsible for the mess that has been created in this world. And therefore one thing is very clear, that all of us must take an action to correct it. One simple answer to this is, uh, whatever the reason this climate change has happened, leave that reason behind. So the climate change has happened because of the fossil energy consumption, and therefore the first thing as an individual you can do is stop using the carbon sources and switch yourself to solar energy. Why and how to switch it, how early to switch it, that is what I'm going to discuss tomorrow.
So fossil minimum use of petrol, diesel, gas.
Yes.
These are the things at
These
least
are
a person can start working instead of going on car singly. Try to use public transport or metros if available on your. Chetanji, one request: if you can make me host, please. In the meantime, I'll.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi.
Good to see.
Can I take 2 minutes?
Yeah, please go ahead. Good to see you.
Yeah, Solanki Sahab, it's a wonderful mission you have taken. I'm really appreciate, and everyone is appreciating. I wish that there's a grand success, and we are with you. Everyone is trying. My simple question is that when we are using green fuel like CNG and PNG, okay, I think it is not a proper, why should we call it green fuel when, this is proven that it is much worse than the diesel as far as cancerous part is concerned. 8-9 times more cancerous than low sulfur diesel. It has been proven by California, that is Air Resources Board. They have proven it long back. And still we are using CNG in a big way, and then we claim, oh, when we say that there will be cancer, is cancerous, they say, oh, that is the reason there are more lung cancer cases in our city and all that. Number two, then I find that PNG, which we are using in the kitchen, again, same status, 8-9 times more cancerous. What should we do regarding this? That is one. And then at least I am advising everyone that when you are switching on the PNG cylinder, you must, you have to switch on the exhaust fan, definitely, before that even. At least that care, till we get rid of this one, because many countries are not using CNG and all that. Rather, they are using hydrogen. I find in Australia, they are using hydrogen. Okay, this sort of, just I wanted to bring to your kind attention that we can spread it further, that what should we do. Biofuels are wonderful. We should use biofuels and all that, which Rangizab is advocating a lot. Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted. Yesterday,
thank you. Thank you. And I think this is a very important piece of information that you have kind of shared in this platform. And we are actually always, we the humans, the modern humans, always look at a very short-term solutions. And if people feel that if you use CNG, then the kind of the air is cleaner, and therefore we should all switch to the gaseous fuel. So these are really short-term solution, and ultimately these are all carbon source. So whatever you do, whether you go for electric vehicle or CNG or PNG, whatever you do, if you are using carbon as a base of it, you can never mitigate climate change. You can make the air clean. And clean air does not mean mitigation of climate change. It's only the environment which is apparently clean, but actual climate gets polluted by the odorless, colorless carbon dioxide. And therefore, let us not make ourselves fool by this fact that the CNG is going to solve the problem, or electric vehicles are going to solve the problem.
No, even electric vehicles, after all, again, what are you using for producing electricity there? Those will, again, as you have mentioned yesterday, those will be materials will be polluting.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. The approach, working with the technology, tweaking technology, I can assure you that we the humans will never find a solution, because as I told yesterday, the 30-40 years history of the planet tells us that more of science and more of technology has created more problems. more economic growth has created more problems rather than solving the problem. So the approach has to be different, and that is what I will discuss tomorrow in the concluding talk of this series, and which is very important to understand why there has to be an alternative approach. It is very important.
And just one thing, even when you are producing solar power, the solar panels and all that, again, how they are produced, again, full consumption of, I mean, these are, again, I think one has to be very judicious. Yes.
Absolutely true. Absolutely.
Good.
Thank you, Dingraji. Thank you. Please mute yourself. Thank you so much. So I go to my next question, Chetanji. 1.5 degree is what we are trying not to reach accordingly, right? But
nobody is trying, but that is what's supposed to be done. Nobody is trying it, unfortunately.
yeah,
That is what the target should be.
right. So my point is, just a minute.
I think Chetan Kothari is trying.
Yeah. So understand if it reaches, if we are not able to do proper work and finally that happens, then what will be the look of world? What will happen? All those things. I sincerely hope it doesn't happen, but still, that is a question.
Well, in this case, as I said, it is not just 1.5 degree. At 1.5 degree centigrade, global warming, pralay will not take place. You know, it is not that suddenly something disaster is going to happen. That will not happen. So, but what will happen at 1.5 degree centigrade? As I told you earlier, that at 1.5 degree centigrade, climate change will starts to become irreversible. It starts to become irreversible. Also means 1.5 degrees centigrade, everything will not become irreversible, but some elements of climate will start to become irreversible. And by the time we reach 2 degrees centigrade, I think the entire climate will become irreversible. What does it mean that becoming irreversible? As I said, becoming irreversible does not mean it will be, kind of havoc and disaster everywhere. But what will happen is all these disastrous event intensity and frequency will increase. And because it will become irreversible after that, if we all start taking corrective actions, those corrective actions will not bear any fruit because by that time climate would have changed completely. So that is what the worrisome part should be, that if at all you want to correct it, if at all we want to put your efforts, do it now. We do not have time. That is the significance of 1.5 degrees centigrade, and that is the significance of the remaining time available to us.
Okay. So there is another question from Pranav, and his question is, are the effects of climate change visually visible near us if we want to see? And how do we convince people from hilly areas on the importance of this change?
Well, Pranav, not only that it is visible to us, it is affecting us already by, if you have not realized it so far. It is already affecting us. Look at the floods and droughts, 360 odd events of disaster taking place, 98 million people getting affected by this event. So this is already due to the climate change. So I keep saying that we do not need scientists to tell us that there is a climate change, right? Our own experience tells us that the climate has changed, the intensity has changed, the frequency has changed, and it is all on right in front of our eyes. It is taking place. So I'm sure everybody has felt, and I keep asking this, do you feel that the climate has changed? Do you feel the weather system has changed? Invariably, answer is yes. People feel. In fact, young people also feel it now. Forget about the old people, because old people would have seen 40, 50 years of life on this planet. But if you ask a 30 years old person, 20 years old person, many of them would also say their experience that yes, they feel that the rains are not same anymore, winter is not same anymore, summer is not same anymore. So the disturbance of the erratic weather pattern, it has become erratic. itself is a proof that the climate has changed. And we can experience it. As I said, keep saying it, we do not need scientists to tell us that climate has changed.
Right, absolutely. I think Pranavji got his response. There is a question from Soumya.
Sir, I'm Lavanya. Have your doubt, sir?
Lavanya, beta, we will come back to you. Please mute yourself. Okay. Soumya ji has a question saying regarding piezoelectricity, which is being, oh, I hope I am pronouncing it correct. But, yeah, so this is being used by Israel while people are walking or the cars are moving. The electricity is generated, and that is how Israel is using. So, can this be something which India also can, or the world can look into?
Well, first of all, the electricity, piezoelectric effect, if people do not know, it's kind of a transducers. When a pressure is created on some material, it results in a potential generation of potential difference, which you can use. Now, as Soumya is saying, that it is the vehicle movement that will actually press that material, piezoelectric material, and generate electricity. Now, in order to press it, when the vehicle is to move, and it will climb certain thing and then push it down. So that itself requires an energy, right? So first of all, that piezoelectric energy is coming from the carbon energy once again. And second thing is the amount of such electricity is very, very tiny as compared to what we are using today. So it can be a good example, a speed breaker where we can use this, but this cannot be even a small fraction of electricity that actually we need. And eventually the pressing is happening because of the cars which are using petrol and diesel. So eventual source of this electricity is only carbon. And I believe that we have to completely move away from the carbon source as soon as possible.
Okay. Chetan ji, your next question will be, who are the most vulnerable?
1 minute, I will just, it started raining.
Sure, sure, please.
I'm safe now.
Okay. Chetan ji,
I can't jazz in my house, my bus. So I have to, as soon as it starts drizzling, I have to close the windows.
we need to see the bus also, Chetan ji. Maybe tomorrow sometime if we can.
Tomorrow we will.
Tomorrow we'll have an extra time. Please keep an extra time gap of so that we can see the bus also. Many people are asking to me, when will Chetan ji be here? We would like to interact and also see the bus. So at least we can have a glimpse of that. So Chetan ji, the question is, who are the most vulnerable to climate change if it happens?
Well, I think I showed very clearly one of the slide where I have shown that the people in Africa, living in Africa, Asia, in very dense area, in water stressed area, flood prone area, those are the people who are going to get affected more. These are the people, these are the countries where the population density is high and the resources are scarce. And that is where the most danger is, because what is climate change? Climate change means more droughts, means more floods, more cyclones. And if the place that you are living in is congested, high density, resources are shared with many people, even a small event of, let's say, power cut can affect many number of people. And therefore, particularly in Asia and Africa, people will be affected more due to the climate change. So
Chetanji, while you were discussing, you mentioned either petrol or fossil fuel vehicle or e-vehicle. It doesn't matter. So is e-vehicle also not a solution for us?
Well, e-vehicle is a solution only if the source of electricity is not carbon, But if you are using e-vehicle and if you are generating that electricity from coal somewhere, then that is not the solution. And as I said, and I'm going to discuss more thoroughly tomorrow, I believe that vehicles in general, are not going to solve the problem. If you're going to do e-vehicle, this vehicle, that vehicle, one has to understand the fundamentals and basics of sustainability, and which we do not understand. I'm going to discuss that tomorrow only. Once we start, it will go a long way.
There is a question from Sunil Kumar Chauhan.
Mhm.
Lavanya, beta, we'll come back to you. Please hold. Please hold. India is a country of versatile climate. So is there a policy from government to handle this, or any plan which government is at India level, or since you are brand ambassador of Madhya Pradesh, is that state government doing some policy on this? Something he wants to understand about that.
Well, my understanding is that at the central level, we have Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change. In every state, I think in Madhya Pradesh also we have kind of Ministry of Energy and the Climate Change. But the problem, Bhatnagarji, is that the governments are not sensitive enough. So though there is something, but in my view, those ministries are not doing enough, and they are mostly for the namesake, and that is also the proof that it is not only the case in India, but this is the case everywhere in the world. And my simple logic is that the world has set up a target that by 2030, we are going to reduce carbon dioxide emission by about 45% of 2015 level. So basically, after 2015, when 181 countries have signed the Paris Agreement, everybody should have started working, every country should have started working, and every year we should have observing the reduction in the carbon dioxide emission. But in reality, the carbon dioxide emissions are still rising with 1.7% rate. What does it mean? That whatever policies the governments are having is not effective. And whatever the ministries that governments are having, I'm not talking about only India, but all over the world. I have also traveled across the world. All over the world are not effective. And therefore, I think it is important that each individual must understand and start taking action.
Okay, so there is a gentleman called Sunil Lohani, and what he is asking is, Professor Solanki, you propose to approach limit the consumption and localized production. But according to him, both seems to be opposite way of what largely all countries are adopting today. To limit consumption, behavior change is needed, and that one must think spiritually, philosophically. How it seems people do not learn from past, even if they suffer heavily loss. Like what he's saying is this Corona and all whatever happened. So from natural disaster, after few months they again start. That is how it is right now also happening. How can an individual realize and change the way of living? I think this question is more again and again. Everybody is going to the same point. How me as a person can contribute?
I just want everyone to hold on till tomorrow. You will get the answer.
Okay. So Sunil ji and everybody, hold on your guns. We are meeting tomorrow also. These questions will be answered by Chetan ji tomorrow itself. So I think we have already passed 2 minutes. So
Sir,
oh yeah,
We'll take
Lavanya, please.
from Bhavan. Yeah.
sir, you told that electric vehicles are better. we have for running the electric vehicles, we have to charge them. To charge them, we want electricity. That electricity is come from coal burning. What is the difference between normal vehicles which produce carbon dioxide and like harmful gases? What is the difference? And still now why the people and the scientists are telling to use the electric vehicles?
So very good point, and that's what I mentioned earlier, Lavanya, that if electric vehicles are charged with the coal-based electricity, then there is no point in. Of course, electric vehicles will be more efficient as compared to the IC engine-based vehicles, and therefore it will give us some benefit. But that will be small as compared to what actually the electric vehicle promises to be. Because your source of electricity remains the same, and again this is the short-sightedness of the people, policymakers, that do not highlight such limitations and tweak the solution. That's the problem of the world. As long as you are going to create a small solution there, a small solution here, I don't think we are going to ever able to correct it, and therefore we need a different approach and wait till tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you, Chetanji. Thank you so much. I would request Professor Krishna Prasad to please give a vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
On behalf of BiGTalks and its associate partners, IEEE Hyderabad, Broadcasting Engineering Society, IET Hyderabad Section, Computer System of India Hyderabad Chapter, Energy Swaraj Foundation, I, Dr. A.V. Krishna Prasad, would like to thank our renowned speaker, Dr. Chetan Singh Solanki, for enlightening us on impact of climate change on nation's development. Today's webinar was full of knowledge and interesting things with the statistical data. It gave deep insights on effects of climate change, and it was really informative. I'm pretty sure the precise knowledge that Dr. Chetan Singh Solanki gave us will definitely help us to understand our role play and responsibility in our climate change. Few points we may get even tomorrow from tomorrow's session also. Once again, I would like to thank Dr. Chetan Singh Solanki for taking out time from his busy schedule and enlightening us on energy independence and our role on climate change of nation's development. Thank you so much. I would also thank BiGTalks CEO Amitabh Bhatnagarji, CSI Hyderabad Chapter Chairman Sri Balaprasad Garu, IETE Secretary Sri Namashivaya Garu, ISTE Faculty Chapter MVSREC Dr. Venkat Subbai Garu, and the man behind the initiation of this event, Sri Ajit Mishra Garu, for organizing such a wonderful, informative, and society useful session. I want to thank the organizing committee who really worked hard to make this event successful. Also, thanks to all the participants present here for paying their attention and learning about their role play in climate change and make energy independence. Hope the listeners act as ambassadors to create awareness among all the people to be part of this mission. Thanks to organizing team for giving this opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Krishna Prasad Garu. Chetanji, if you are not aware, Garu is a language which we replace it by G, like Chetan Ji. In Andhra, we say Chetan Garu. So just for your information. So thank you. I think your last words that are sincerely welcome. That all the people who have joined for 3 days act as the ambassador for this, and Professor Chetan, who has started this initiative for human beings. I will not say it is for one person or two person. It is for human being and Mother Earth. Picks up fast, and we also can be a part of it a little bit. We can also do something from our side. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining. Let us meet tomorrow and listen from Chetanji And we will also have a time to see Chetanji's bus where he is going to spend 10 more years. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And